Hi and welcome to another episode of Straight Out of Camera, proudly sponsored by Fuji from South Africa. Joining me live in studio is Managing Director of TechSmart.co.za, Mike Joubert. Hi Mike, how are you doing?
Yeah, not too bad, Eslie. How are you?
Very well. And in Cape Town we have commercial photographer Leon Oosthuizen. Hi Leon.
Hi guys.
Hi Leon, how's it going?
Good.
Guys, so today is episode 11 and the genre we'll be discussing today is landscape photography. Mike, with South Africa's huge amount of beautiful areas, landscape photography has become a very fast growing genre, or a very popular genre in fact, and in the previous Photo Inform poll it was second behind wildlife photography.
I'm actually a little bit surprised about that because I would have thought that landscape would take the nod for the number one spot. Because I think you can use your kit lens. You don't need those massive lenses that you need sometimes for animal photography. Plus, of course, the fact that there are such a number of beautiful places where you don't actually have to pay to enter. So, I root for landscape. I think any photographer can do that.
Unfortunately, with this market not being one of the most lucrative genres in South Africa, could be due to the total amount of landscape images that people can take with their kit lenses. I only know of a small amount of photographers that actually make a full-time living out of it. The two that stands out for me is Cape Town-based photographer Martin Osner and obviously Joburg-based Koos van der Linde.
Yes, there are a couple of other guys I'd like to highlight as well. First and foremost, my good friend Paul Bruins. He has been known as Panorama Paul. I found him on Flickr and we just happened to connect in real life like that. But he's an IT guy and he is a total tech geek as well. And he recently had a post on Petapixel where he put together a panoramic series of cameras so that he can have a panorama of moving things like waves. Stitched them together because they were all synchronized to photograph at exactly the same time. I mean, he's that obsessive. So he built a rig. Awesome. He's got 6 cameras on there, and he put those together. He's that kind of guy. Mm-hmm. And then we also have Hougaard Malan, who's also down here, and he's quite well known in the international photography circles. So they're producing some interesting things. And then obviously also one of the Fuji ex-photographers, Peter Delaney, besides his wildlife, he's also doing fine art, black and white landscapes, which I really enjoy seeing when he posts those.
Mike, international photographers that stand out in the genre?
I think arguably the biggest name by far when it comes to landscape is, of course, Ansel Adams. He's truly a master of the art. But it's important to note that not only did he do the footwork involved, sometimes lugging up kilos and kilos of gear up the mountains there in Yosemite Park, but he also developed what he called the zone system, where you had a look at the different types of tones in your image and then adjust your exposure accordingly. And that came in very helpful to kind of just boost his images above the rest. Also, a guy called Michael Kenner. He's still living and still taking photos. He uses long exposure for this like dreamlike minimalist landscapes. And it looks very easy. It's easy on the eye, of course, the fact that it's these, the waves takes this strange texture. But it's very difficult to do. I haven't seen many people that effectively can take the same type of style of photos that he does.
Mike, there's another guy that I want to mention in the international landscape photography circles and more like a fine art kind of guy. That's Edward Burtynsky. Mm-hmm. And he does almost like humanitarian work in the way that he approaches his landscapes, the type of footprint that people leave behind and the effect that we have on the landscape and how we make the landscape different because of our interaction with the world and what we take from it and how we don't necessarily steward all of our resources well. So if you look at his photographs, they are large and they definitely fall into the fine art landscape category. But I find it greatly emotional and very motivating to relook at the way that we interact with our world. It's not just the pretty stuff that makes good landscapes, but it's also those that are thought-provoking. I think that almost connects with the German romantics from the painting backgrounds in the fine art circles, where they actually use landscapes to portray biblical scenes and what do you call it, religious narratives. I find that connection very interesting there.
Well, it's interesting because it also reminds me a little bit of Sebastião Salgado, who also is known for these really humanitarian photos, but then at the same time, his landscapes are just absolutely breathtaking. Roelof Louw is a photographer and IT engineer based in Cape Town. Now, if you follow the Cape Town hashtag on Instagram, you'll know there are a couple of photographers that can truly capture the beauty of its landscape. And at Dolphimon, as he is known there, is one of them. He says, since I was a child, I've always had an appreciation for beauty, beautiful things. And as such, I've had a burning desire to create and share, and when possible, to inspire. Luckily for us, he chose photography to do so. Roelof, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
How many times have you actually hiked up mountains around Cape Town? Tell me that first.
Well, since I've been following my passion, this year for Lion's Head, on yesterday morning, was my 21st summit.
Just this year?
Just this year, yeah. Table Mountain about 3 times this year. But I expect to match the amount of weeks in a year, and I hope to reach 52.
Uh-huh. But it goes to show that sometimes with landscape photography, you really do need to put in the legwork to get the shots. Do the early morning summit and capture the sunrise.
Definitely. Some people call me crazy because I go to the same spot every time. Well, one of the same spots, which is obviously the well-known, internationally renowned Lion's Head. But I can promise you, each time there's something different. Yesterday morning, for example, I was in freezing cold. I was the only person up there, but I managed to capture a nice halo during moonset. And about an hour and a half later, an incredible sunrise from the same spot. So call me crazy, but I'm the one privileged enough to capture it. So, yeah, you have to put in the legwork, but at the end of the day, if it feeds your soul, it's not really legwork, is it?
For sure.
Roelof, I want to just jump in here and ask you, now that you say you summit 21 times, clearly you are used to carrying not just yourself, but some photographic toys up and down. Do you maybe just want to share what it is that you do your amazing landscapes with, and what are your what is it, top 5, top 10 things that you make sure that's in your bag every time?
Okay, well, first of all, before I pack anything, there's the diligent gear check. It's nothing worse than being on top of a mountain, you've got no memory card, or your lens is not with you, or the other lens is not with you. So proper gear check. I will take up 2 primes. It's primarily my 12mm and 35mm. I find those are good focal lengths for playing around. And then I take my trusty XT1 with me. It's a brilliant camera, and even though the awesomeness of the XT2 is out yet, it still amazes me to this day. Then I've got a little Manfrotto Moto tripod, very small and compact. That gets stuck in there, and because I have to currently in my current situation, I'm an IT engineer, and I'm doing photography for the passion of it. I've still got my work gear in there as well, because as soon as I descend that mountain, I'm back to the ground. So I would say I'm glad I went the mirrorless route. It does make the hikes a bit easier as well. Yeah. And then, of course, we got a trusty headlamp. Without that, I would be lost on the mountain. Safety first. Even though you think you know the mountain, respect the mountain, because lighting condition and wind, it's always an important factor.
Roelof, your profession is in the IT field. How did you get into photography?
Well, I always had a desire to like I said, previously, to create things and to share with people. And I don't have the God-given talent of what I see in my mind to put it down on paper. And so after school, I wanted to do graphic design, something on a, digital. And somehow that got me into IT. So I work with computers, but not on the artistic side of things. And then I discovered the camera function on modern cell phones, and I started practicing composition and framing, and eventually I went over into, I made my first purchase, which is a mirrorless camera, and it was a Fujifilm X-T10, and I was amazed by the results. So I basically, it stemmed from that urge and that need to create, and I just practiced through the years, and that's how it started.
I've seen a couple of photos on your Instagram that certainly uses neutral density filters. Can you give a couple of hints and tips in regards to usage?
Yes, definitely. I would say if you're going to go for neutral density, always capture it with appropriate filter. You would go with your normal NDX 400 up until the ND 1000, which is a 10 stop. So it just depends on how long if you want to smooth out water, if it's going to be a sunset with nice palette colors in the sky, you want to get those streaks. And then there's always the other option if you don't have a neutral density filter, but you do have Adobe Photoshop, for example, or something that will allow you to stack. You can take 50 photographs and you can stack them, and not only will you get a long exposure effect, but your ISO will be dropped. It will clean itself, and you'll get a nice, really clean image. So if you don't have an ND filter yet and you're still saving for one, that's also a route you can take.
I'm quite interested now that we're on the topic of ND filters and all that kind of things. You mentioned a light tripod that's easy to hike up and travel with. How do you make sure that doesn't have any small movements and vibrations? Because the longer you expose for, if there's even a slight breeze, obviously that picks up. So how do you counterbalance the effect of the wind on long exposures?
Okay, so I've got two options. I usually like to go quite low with my shots, especially for that effect. And this little tripod I have can fold completely flat. Obviously, the lower you are to the ground, the less wind you'll have. And then there's also the ballast option, where it's got a hook at the bottom, and you can hook up your bag just to get that extra weight down that pull on the tripod. But that being said, just make sure that if you're going to set up for a long exposure, check your conditions. I believe conditions and light make half of the photo.
Roelof, a couple of episodes before, we had a guy called Anton Bosman on show, and he spoke about how he shoots his cityscapes, and he could underexpose up to 4 stops and then bring it back with the dynamic range of his camera, the capabilities of his dynamic range, bring it back to where he wanted it to be. Is that something that you do in post after taking the picture?
Definitely, it depends on the scene again. Sometimes you just want to expose the sky and have your mountains as a silhouette. The other times, if you've got a nice foreground, you'll definitely want to do that. You can either obviously go in the HDR option, or like Anton said, if you're spoiled, with Fujifilm, you've got this incredible dynamic range where, you can just pull those shadows back in post. And I've done it a lot as well, and my jaw drops every time. I'm amazed, compared especially with full frame counterparts. It's amazing what the Fuji X system can do, really.
How much work do you do in post?
It depends. I would say my post ratio, for example, on Instagram would be about 75% post, 25% straight out of camera. I do feel sometimes if you get it right in camera, which if there was no post option, like in the olden days, if you get it right in camera, that you get that special feeling. I don't know how to explain it. Maybe butterflies in your stomach, but if you get it, you need to share it right there and then. And that's what also makes the Fuji technology nice, is you can just over Wi-Fi share it with your phone or to your phone and share it from there. Very, very awesome system.
Do you have a couple of tips for people in regards to getting more followers on Instagram or making those special shots?
I have gone through those tips myself. You get from the dark corners where people buy bots or subscribers or fake likes and comments, and then you get guys who say, post regularly, post this time, post that time. It comes down to one thing and one thing only, and this is my humble opinion. Let your photos do the work. If you post, don't post for the sake of posting. If you feel it's something special or maybe something someone has not seen before, share it. It doesn't matter what time of the day it is, share it. Unfortunately, you have to use hashtags as well, but that's just the way the algorithm of the system work. But at the end of the day, if it's a good image, let the images do the talking. That's my biggest tip.
Roelof, you just spoke about those butterflies in your stomach when you see what's happening on the back of your camera, reviewing it. That's after you've shot. What motivates you to actually do landscape? What made you choose landscape and maybe even approach specific landscapes rather than cityscapes or otherwise? There's so many different genres. What is it about the landscapes that really draw you in and make it the compelling thing for you to go out and photograph and find shots on?
Leon, I would say I work with a lot of people every day. So maybe on a psychological level, I'm trying to avoid shooting people, but I don't mind candid shots of people, but the posing and everything, I guess, different strokes for different folks. For landscapes, for me, the big thing about it is usually things you can't put a price on. You wake up for that light. You get to experience it. It's a combination of being privileged to take the shot and being absolutely humbled. You almost feel insignificant sometimes when you get these beautiful moments on camera. And the biggest thing is you can't put a price on it. It's absolute soul food. And things that you can't put a price on in life, for me personally, it just carries so much more wealth than any amount of money would ever do. So I think that's my biggest motivation. That will be landscape and my absolute favorite, which is astrophotography.
For our listeners that are from Johannesburg wanting to go to Cape Town and take those incredible images that you capture, what is the process? How do we get there? Is it safe? Do we need to have sort of certification beforehand or approval? How do you go about that, Roelof?
It is, I would say, safe. There's always safety in numbers depending on the area you're going to. But if you find yourself in Cape Town on a Friday morning at 5:30, you're always welcome to come join me for a hike up Lion's Head, weather permitting. There's so many different areas in and around Cape Town. I would, though, say if you really want to go for astrophotography, you should head up to the Northern Cape, close to Sutherland. Very safe. I mean, everybody knows the Karoo, or the stories of the Karoo, wide open spaces and elevation. So, yeah, if you want to go for astro, I would say Northern Cape. If you want to come for beautiful land, sea, and cityscapes, come meet me in Cape Town.
Are there any places that you would like to travel to capture nice images across the globe?
Definitely. So in 2019, my wife and I, we're planning a trip to Iceland, which I'm rather excited about. It's only in 2019, though, because our randelas don't go very far there. So lots of planning and saving involved. You got the Aurora Borealis there, incredible blue lakes, waterfalls, greens. It's for me, it's a combination
landscapes, ice caps, yeah.
It's literally everything. So that's my number one destination. But to be honest with you, this podcast would last quite long if I have to list all the countries I want to go to. I've done Southeast Asia quite extensively, but unfortunately, I did not own a Fujifilm at that time. So I would maybe revisit some of those parts again.
Out of your bucket list of top 10 things besides Iceland, are there any particular kind of shots that you have in mind that you want to cross off, things that you want to do and maybe revisit and improve and test yourself on?
One thing I would like to do, well, my biggest item on my bucket list is obviously the Northern Lights or Aurora Borealis. I think it's something special. It's an amazing phenomena, and it'd be my number one item to tick off. Other than that, I would really like to attempt a day to night to day time-lapse ones, where your sun will set. It will obviously be in the Karoo, and once the sun sets, that Milky Way pops out. I think it will be a cool transition, and it's something I personally would like to put effort into one day.
When it comes to landscapes, as I mentioned, the connection for me between sort of like the legacy of landscapes in fine art, there was always a message or some kind of exterior motivation for somebody to go out and make that image of that landscape. I'm quite interested to find out, you mentioned psychologically that you detach from shooting people and it's maybe therapeutic that way. What is it about that motivation, that sense of calm and everything else that you translate into your images, and how do you find ways of expressing that? I hope the question is clear, because it's a fuzzy kind of a emotional, psychological kind of a type of answer. But yeah, I just want to find out what that motivation is, and I think for our listeners also just to be able to make something abstract like your thoughts and emotions and express that in landscape or even in the genres that they find themselves shooting in. How does that process look for you in a hands-on kind of a way?
No pressure there, Leon. So I think one of the first biggest motivational things for me is a stark contrast between a nice landscape and the hustle and bustle of the city. Myself being in the rat race every morning, you start building up desire to break free, to go out, to explore, to create, to capture, to inspire. That's basically what it comes down to get away from the human element. it is it's I can feel, for example, let's say the weather didn't play in my favor or time wasn't my friend, and for some odd reason I couldn't go up Lion's Head or another hiking trail or go and explore. I get this itch, I get this burn, because it's like tasting something good and then you want another, taste of that something good. Put it to you this way, I've never looked at the sky the same again since I took up photography, ever. And yeah, I think, like I said, it's that stark contrast between the city vibes, the hustle and the bustle, and just pure Mother Nature. The longer I sit in the city, the more I've got the urge to break free and just to go and explore and capture and share. Yeah.
Leon, as a professional photographer yourself, have you ever had the notion to just go out and shoot landscape? Say, screw everything else, I want to do landscape.
It's a weekly thing for me. Things get so busy, and like Roelof said, it's a therapy more than it is a photographic activity. It's a way to process your thoughts. When you're doing long exposures, you have to slow everything about yourself down. It's not a fashion shoot or a sport situation where the shutter is firing at rapid pace and you're racking up that shutter count in your camera. It's the exact opposite of this. You need to go and plan. You need to think. You need to, if it's star trails and that kind of stuff, or astrophotography, you need to kind of get your composition in the day to kind of figure out where the sky is going to be. So it's probably not just a one day thing. You need to keep tracking at the apps, and it can become quite an obsession to plan your quiet time. But once you're there, and maybe you have a hip flask with some whiskey or something to keep you company when it's getting really cold in the Karoo, those kind of moments are fun. If you're doing it with one or two other guys as well, which we actually plan to do in the middle of the winter, that becomes a team building thing. That's where you grow friendships. That's where you actually spend time being human, rather than just constantly pandering for the needs of other people to see what it is that you're doing. You're actually just connecting man to man, and I think that is something that I look forward to in the way that I think about what I do with landscape photography. That's just exploring my scenes around me, and it's a gateway into things that I would otherwise have to put away during the week for the sake of admin and managing family and all that kind of stuff.
For sure.
So, yeah.
I like what you're saying, because it takes away from that constant obsession to get likes on Instagram and pulls it back to just yourself and your friends, that human connection, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think Roelof said exactly the same thing. For him, it's a detox situation. He's more of a man on a mission, because he does this almost daily. Never leaves home without his camera, and just in case the weather turns and there's a nice cloud forming on the horizon, then you know for sure you're going to see something in the evening from him.
Roelof, we're recording this podcast a couple of days after the storms in Cape Town. Did you manage to get a couple of decent shots?
Yeah, in between work, fortunately we've got an agency that's in Sea Point, and it's one of the better places to be when you get these swells. I didn't get a massive wave splashing, unfortunately, because I had other things to attend to that day, but I did take a stroller along the promenade, and I was involved in what you could call a foam party. I recently dropped an image on Instagram as well, where most of the feedback was, "Is your camera okay?" So it was a cool experience. And yes, my camera is okay. It's that one guy at the party, he can fall around, but he always have his drink upright. That is my camera. It's my baby, and I call it priorities. Even if I was to be on the ledge of a mountain, I told my friends, please just grab my camera. Just that last bit of footage.
Roelof, where can we find you on social media?
You can find me on Instagram on @Dolphyman. And I'm also busy creating a Facebook page, and it will be the same handle @Dolphyman. It'll be up during this weekend still. So, keep an eye out, and I'll also drop a link on there once I've got my website up and running. I've had a few people asking me why I don't have a website, and I think it's time to go that route.
Roelof, thank you for joining us. Leon, Mike, where can we find you?
You guys can find me on Instagram @Leon Oosthuizen, because it's just me, and Facebook Leon's Lens, and that's also my website leonslens.com.
You can find me on Instagram @Fark1.
Thank you, guys. It was wonderful chatting to you. Thank you, Roelof, for joining us
Cheers,
in the
Roelof.
Cape Town studio.
Guys, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to you. And yeah, it was an awesome experience. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Have
guys.
a great day. Bye.
Cheers, guys.
brandlive.co.za, co.za, co.za, co.